discussion or action we need to take on that? Hearing none, we'll move ahead. Approval of the minutes from July 10th, 2020. The attachments on the agenda, did you guys have a chance to review or action we need to take on that? Hearing none, we'll move ahead. Okay, delay. Approval.
Okay. Maybe that was
a weird.
That was probably Mark.
Yeah, I think that might be my
Unmuted.
background.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from July.
Okay, Fairly moved to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Oh, Carrie, Ally, seconds.
Okay. All in favor of approval of minutes from July 10, 2020?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay, next item is public comment. We have Phil Whitney and Ingrid Gaither here from the public. Does anybody have a comment at this time?
No, the meeting is making me very heavy.
Okay.
That's fine. And I'll wait till toward the end of the meeting to see if I have any comments.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Anything else? No? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to reports and updates. The first one is safe return to school. Okay, you have a.
But did Mark get any, doesn't he have to say if he's gotten any public comment via email?
No. Correct.
I'm not aware of any, and I'll double check with Selena, but I'm not aware of any. Haley, are you?
No.
I'll double check with Selena because she's right outside my office, and we'll check into that.
I just know that every meeting that you vocally have said that, Mark, so I just want to make sure that anyone watching realizes that we have not received public comment via email.
Right, and again, it's if people want to submit it, it's listed on the agenda. Public comment should be submitted to MDI RSS boards at mdirss.org, and that is the way that we officially receive it, record it, and make it public. And if anybody needs help or assistance, just call the office. Selena and I or Haley, we're happy to help anybody and facilitate that.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Okay, very good. And can you guys hear me okay as far as over the Zoom?
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you fine. I can hear all of you really well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, reports and updates. The first one is a safe return to school update.
I'll try to be succinct because I want to allow time for questions for you all. Lots going on. I first off want to thank Amy. She's been at all of our board chair meetings. I think she's very knowledgeable in terms of what the information we've been discussing, which we are in the process of transitioning our communications more towards the building principals. We know it's really important at this point that parents and community members hear from the building principals to know the status of what we're preparing to do. I want to say that I'm really proud to be the superintendent of the AOS, and the way that the diversity of our communities has stood together through this. And that said, I'm really confident that moving forward, each community school's identity will be honored and valued. So in a nutshell, what the AOS board approved, and just for the members of the public so they can know, with our policies and our procedures and as much as we can stay together as a district, we do that while honoring the local controls. So things like calendars, broad calendars, policies, and in this case, safe return to schools. That's how we've vetted this. And that's really under the umbrella of our interlocal agreement that's been in existence since the district was formed. So what we've done, we took a lot of time over the summer to gather people. There's been many people that said, well, is this process transparent? I don't know how much more transparent we can make it when we have over 30 people meeting throughout the summer, teachers, ed techs, administrators, board members, scientists. We had all those people come together, all volunteering their own time, putting in a heck of a lot of energy in terms of what the safe return to school would look like. There's a lot of information out there, and I'm not here to convince anybody one thing or the other. From day one, I've been looking at data and dealing with science and facts, but also at the same time listening to people, because feelings are real and they're important, but we have to look at facts and we have to look at data. We cannot be ruled by fear. We need to make sure that people's fears are heard, or their concerns are heard, but at the same time, we just have to look at what is and isn't happening in our community. So in short, the AOS board did approve the return to schools on September the 8th. And I know we're going to talk about your calendar, but we're moving or recommending moving the start date for students to September the 8th. That's important because that move buys us additional time. And that time is really important to make sure our buildings are ready, our staff are trained, and all of the things that we have told the community and our staff that we need to do to make sure that we can safely return to schools for students and staff. That includes things like ensuring personal protective equipment, PPE, is not only ordered, but on site and available. Making sure that our building cleanliness standards are being met, and we identify individually by each building what that means and those protocols. That looks a little different specifically on the outer islands. And what day is it? I get confused. Today's Friday, sorry. It all blends together. On Wednesday, I went to every outer island school with an environmental engineer. I took this individual to Frenchboro. That's obviously very, very close to your school in terms of scope, size, and structure. And we visited the Swans Island School, and I visited both schools on the Cranberry Isles, Islesford and Great Cranberry. The purpose of that visit was to take a look at our systems and our capabilities so that we can work with our principals, we can work with our custodial maintenance staff or contracted services to ensure that our buildings are ready, that we have looked at ventilation and we've looked at air quality. So that individual right now is looking at architectural plans and making recommendations. Those recommendations are going to look really different for your schools than they would MDI High School, or all of our buildings are so different. So that's going to take some time to do, but that won't prevent us from starting school on the 8th. And what that looks like is we are recommending going full remote on September 8th for teaching and learning for students in all of our schools, and evaluating that on the 21st of September with an end date of the 21st for remote, and then a shift to remote, whatever parents choose, and or a hybrid model. However, the outer island schools and some of our schools may be ready sooner. And that's the caveat, that if the Ashley Bryan School, the Longfellow School, whichever school the board approves, the community supports, or both, if they're ready to go and we have those standards in place, we can move to in-person instruction sooner than the 25th. And I'm confident we'll see some of our schools doing that, because the readiness will look different because of a number of factors, things like density, student population, systems. So I don't want to go on too much longer because I could speak about this all day long. I live it every day. There's a lot of things that need to happen, but I think it would probably be more productive if I shifted over and had any questions from the board at this time. And Haley, before we do that, is there anything I left out or that you'd like to interject? I know that we've done surveys with parents and staff, but information is changing daily. Anything you want to add, Haley?
Yeah, not at this time, Mark.
Okay. Amy, I'm happy to take any questions. I hope that provides a in-depth overview, but parents will start receiving some pretty specific information from building principals. To include, we'll be releasing a staff handbook that's going to answer a lot of questions or provide resources, as well as a family and parent handbook as well. those are being finalized. We're working day and night to get that stuff out. I should also mention that the hospital, the MDI hospital and the Jackson lab have been incredible. Their resources for us. And when I talked about safe return to schools and being in a green zone, the one thing that's a little different for us is that, you know, Bar Harbor, Maine isn't just a great place in the state of Maine. It's a destination for people all over the world. And it looks different right now. And we don't know. We have some data that talks about our rates in Hancock County, but the problem with that is people from out of state that may be positive and may have found their results are not required. They voluntarily can report that data, which is great. I'm sure most people are doing the right thing, but we will not know the impact of tourism or the impact of any potential transmission for a little bit of time. And we need to take a look at that data. And so that has really come forward too as a significant concern. Again, our outer island schools and outer island populations look different. And that's true of some of our schools within the AOS as well. So I want parents to know that this isn't something, we're trying to be we are being very prudent and cautious in moving forward. We don't have a second chance to get this right. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Mark, for all of that, hard work. I know that was monumental task, just coming up with a plan and just being, listening to the concerns that came forward. And I just really appreciate you and the team. Does anybody have questions for Mark about the safe return?
Well, not necessarily for Mark, but
Okay.
for Haley.
Okay.
So, is this the time that we're going to discuss what it will look like when we return? And are we planning to go remote then September 8th through the 21st, and are we going to do, what's our options?
I guess
So I think with that, Darlene, we're going to be getting into the calendar. That'll be one piece. But if Amy wants to go down that road now, we certainly can. Haley and I are prepared to make a recommendation and so Amy, it's really up to you. Do you want us to start talking about, because I think one of the things is the logistics of the schools and boats. And so it's a great question, but I guess I want to know how you want to proceed.
Well, Haley has some stuff prepared, I think.
Yep. Yes.
But Carrie's got a question.
No, I have a statement.
Okay.
So we do have a bunch of discussion items that falls under. I prefer to stay with the agenda and just get the update for the Longfellow lift so we can get reports and updates. That's all that was supposed to be, is an update and a report on the safe return to school. Get the Longfellow off the table so that, because the discussion items is probably going to be a lot more lengthy. And if we jump to this and then have to jump to that, I would just rather, let's just get Longfellow off the lift update off the table and then go into the big discussion items, which, so that's all going to fall under that stuff anyways.
Is that what you were planning, Haley?
And we can get Darlene's question answered, all of the questions answered under that framework. And I agree with Carrie, that's a good way to proceed.
Okay, yeah, okay, so Darlene's nodding, so we're good with that. Okay, so as far as the general plan, with the remote start and the calendar change, anybody have questions about that part of it? All right, then let's move on to the Longfellow lift update.
So you folks are in the Longfellow School. I was there Wednesday. What do you think? How's it looking for you so far?
I haven't looked at the list
Great,
yet.
it looks like a handle.
All right. So I haven't test driven the lift, but I was in the lift.
Just test drive the lift.
I didn't test drive the lift. I've got to call into Spencer, but I think we're probably 99.9% done. I just need them to tell me the green light that it's okay for use and occupancy. I've got to call in. We're playing phone tag, but I know that they were overall, and I was really impressed with how Spencer and Holyoke Builders were worked with Maine Accessibility Corp. I think we got it right this time. I hope we have it right this time. But at the end of the day here, I think that piece is ready to go. I just need them to tell me it's okay for public use. And my question too, and this is probably a Maine accessibility question. You know, I need to know who comes out and inspects those things, not just now, but on a regular basis. So that's not a piece that is in my wheelhouse. So I'll be following up with that. Haley, do you have anything to add in terms of the lift?
No.
I'll be providing a reconciliation for the board of the money that was encumbered and spent. Last time I spoke with Nancy, we were on track, so I don't have any concerns about that. I don't know if you have any specific questions for me about the lift. I'm just waiting for them to tell me it's okay for use. And I know Ingrid's there, and Ingrid's been great about providing access to the building. And if she has anything to add or any questions on, she may know more than I do just in talking to the contractors.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add other than just a compliment to both organizations, Spencer and Holyoke, and all their workers in Maine Accessibility. Compared to other crews I've dealt with in the past as kind of a caretaker for the building and the librarian down the hall, they were real good about keeping me informed, communicating with me on and off island, and respectful of library operations and keeping doors closed and locked and things like that. So I expected it to be a lot worse over the summer, and it's not.
Yeah, I found them very user-friendly, and I don't know if any members of the community have had questions, but I don't anticipate any delays in having that up and running. And certainly, for town meetings or events, that should be good to go. I don't have any. I've not heard anything that would cause any concern. So I'm just waiting for that call back from Spencer, and I put it in Wednesday. So not sure if he's out on the island, but Ingrid, if you happen to see him out there, be great. I just want to connect with him, and you can ask him the same questions if we're ready to go.
Okay, sure will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a comment there by Mark. Mark, I think the way the inspection system works is that Maine Accessibility or some private contractor will come out and inspect the lift, and then within a short time thereafter, the state of Maine sends somebody out
Okay.
and also inspects it.
Okay.
So there's two different entities there that have to do an annual inspection. I just
Now that makes sense, Phil. Obviously it makes sense that you'd have an independent agency like the state reviewing it. So thank you. And I'll follow up with Maine Accessibility on that. I appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Any other questions about the lift? Okay. Then we're gonna move on to discussion items. The 2020-2021 school calendar.
So I just, as an overview, let you know that we have a very, very consistent calendar across the AOS, but there are some slight variations that Haley can explain. I'd like to turn it over to Haley, but just state to the board, I'd like to recommend that the student start date, whether that be remote, hybrid, combination, that the student or the teaching and learning start date be on September the 8th. And that will not extend the school year, because what we're asking to do is have the Commissioner of Education waive the 175 student day requirement to 170. That is something that most superintendents are doing across the state. I believe every public school, Hancock County school, has already made that recommendation and move as well. So I'll turn it over to Haley for any other pieces or questions or explanations specific to the Cranberry Isle schools?
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I didn't print it out and my computer's zooming, but that's the only change that we're making. Our calendar was already aligned with the rest of MDI this year. And we were planning on just accommodating any professional development needs for our teachers on a substitute or, just sort of configuring ourselves for a day different rather than having a whole different calendar. So yeah, that's the only change that will affect us, and obviously will be greatly appreciated to give us the time to, prep the buildings and for learning and get everybody trained and all our content created for the opening day. So yeah, unless there's any questions, I think that's pretty much it.
Do we need to, okay, so this one specifically is just about the calendar being shifted to the September 8th start date.
Correct.
Does that include the 170 days versus 175? Do we
It
vote on?
does. It does. If you approve the record, so all three calendars are attached to the agenda. The current calendar that the Cranberry Island Board has approved is the first link. That is what is in place right now. Then a proposed revision, which is what Haley and I just described, and it's simply asking for teaching and learning for students to begin on the 8th, which is after Labor Day. That additional time, but it won't change the start time for teachers. The teachers and staff would start with the original calendar date. The difference is students will be pushed back and we'll use that time for professional development. Staff will be required to be on site in the buildings and being part of all that training. So, and then Carrie, back to the last piece of your question, it will not extend the school year for students and staff because we are asking the Commissioner of Education for a waiver for the required statutory number of days of 175 to 170. And again, almost every superintendent I've spoken to, well, I know every superintendent in our county has done that, but most superintendents across the state are doing it. And I don't anticipate there'll be any hesitation about approving this waiver if the board approves this change.
So we make a vote on the first one.
So we are recommending that you adopt the second link, the proposed revisions, which is, it includes 11 PD days. They're building based beginning on August 25th, 26th, 27th, 31st. And then also a teacher day on the 28th, classroom. And then September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, building based PD days. And then students beginning instruction, whatever that may be at that specific school, remote, hybrid, teaching and learning instruction beginning on the 8th. And then no change to the rest of the calendar that the board has approved. Is that correct, Haley?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your question, Carrie? So you would, if the board wants to approve our recommendation, a motion would be in order to accept the proposed.
That's what I'm waiting for, Mark.
Yes. Okay,
I
sorry.
was asking if we have to vote on that.
Yes.
I completely understand the 175 day, the 170 days and the start date. I just wanted to make sure, like the first blue highlighted thing that says current 2020, 2021, that's something that we have to vote on. So what is that specific question so that we can vote on that one?
You've already voted on that. That's what's in place now.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't need to vote on that. We need to vote on the.
You
second.
don't need to vote on that. We're asking you to amend that calendar by adopting
Okay,
the second one. So if the board wanted to entertain that, a motion would be in order to adopt the proposed revisions to the 2020, 2021 Cranberry Isle School calendar. And you would be adopting that revised model, which is everything we just talked about. That would be your motion. And if you approve that, then you're done. The calendar's set. Does that make sense, Amy?
Yes.
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay,
When I was looking at it this morning, and one of the notes at the bottom still said students start on August 31st. It was just a note, but all the calendar was correct.
Okay.
So I didn't know if we needed to change that note before we approve it.
where is it, Amy? I'm sorry,
The bottom right-hand corner,
which version? The second?
the proposed revisions.
Okay, bottom right, okay.
In the bottom right-hand corner, the note said student start day is August 31st. And I just thought that should be changed to match what's on the calendar.
I'm not seeing that. But we can amend it. I don't see that under notes. It's right on the calendar?
It said that it had been revised.
Yeah, that's where it's in yellow, under the number of student days, teacher days. You go gray, then you have gray line, a blue line, and then the first yellow line.
Oh, yes, I see it. Absolutely. Well, yes, so that would be, yep, good catch. So yeah, we would yes, so we would make that amendment, just that note be changed to September 8th. Good catch. Thank you.
Make that one change, I'm good to.
Yep.
I would accept a nomination.
Yeah, I mean, within your motion, if that could be as amended to include that correction.
So I'll make a motion.
Okay,
So I make a motion that we adopt the proposed revision, 2020, 2021 Cranberry Isle School Calendar with the correction made of the August 1st start date.
September 8th started date.
September 8th.
Right, I mean, with the correction
Yeah.
she wants done. Yeah,
Okay.
so we're adopting that calendar with this set to rates.
Okay.
Thank you, Darlene. You need a second, Amy, before you can discuss.
Very seconded. Okay, so is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Huh?
Oh, it's not on the calendar.
Okay, all in favor of
Aye,
revising the calendar?
aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. That's great support for our staff, and I think it's going to be a real benefit for our students and families. So thank you very, very much. Haley we're all set with calendar, correct?
Yes.
So now, Amy, before you go on to the boat, I know that Darlene had some questions, and I know Haley wanted to talk about some information for the school. Is this a good time to do that, or do you want to move on to action, or how do you want to proceed?
First, because I think everything depends on that decision.
See, I think, okay, so looking at this agenda, that's exactly what I keep thinking, is that we can't talk about everything else until we talk about the action.
That's right.
Okay, so seeing as the bid for the boat transportation kind of plays into this
Right. This would be one.
discussion, I think we need to move on to the action item.
Okay.
And consideration of the bid for boat transportation.
That's attached to your agenda. So Haley, do you want to take the lead on that? How would you like to proceed?
Mark,
Huh?
I'm fine doing that if you want me to.
Yeah, please. Thanks.
Can you see me now? Okay.
I read it.
Read it?
You guys all read it.
It was right in the agenda, yeah.
I didn't realize it was supposed to be very late.
Oh.
And I just told the board.
Click on all of them.
I'm gonna take a photo right now. Shoot, I'm sorry.
I read it.
I'll tell you about
It's
it.
okay,
If you
yeah,
wanna
I'm
see
good
it,
with that.
I'll
I'm
figure out
gonna,
the
I go to click on that next time.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha.
So as you know, we put out a bid to look for special boat transportation to transport our students. The bid included high school transportation as part of the proposal, and as well as the elementary teachers, on and off. So basically, it was looking at like 3 round trips a day. So as I started to get inquiries from potential vendors, the cost of 3 round trips a day was clear that it was just going to be pretty astronomical. And there was concern about the fact that the commuter boat was already set up to align with the MDI High School bus pickup, like that had already been arranged, and there were less people on that boat, da, da, da. So I said to the vendors who are interested, these are proposals, so if you would like to propose something
Something.
different with less trips, like we will look at any proposals, related to this idea. So I talked to Beal and Bunker, and they did not feel like they could put in a bid because of the conflict in times with their current runs and their need to have 2 boats for maintenance and switching out. They couldn't always guarantee that they would have a boat with the capacity for the number of people we were asking to be transported. They said if we ended up looking at needing a smaller boat, like a 6-pack boat, that they would be able to put out a proposal for that. But as the current request stood, they didn't feel like they could come up with something. So we did receive one quote that was linked to the agenda, and that was, let me make sure I get this right, from Salocadia. And the quote is for the shoulder seasons for fall and spring. It's for 2 trips a day, and it's $160 a round trip, which is very similar to what we pay for special boats normally. So that's why it's kind of ballparking anyway. And it would be ended up, if we did, 2 trips a day for all of those days, around $20,600 for the shoulder season. So,
And the reality is, this is just the shoulder season.
correct.
Yeah.
And so, Amy, if it's okay, it's kind of a natural segue to expand a little bit more about, okay.
Yeah.
So as I've been, spending countless hours thinking about all this, it's also more of the concern is in the winter when you're in the closed cabin. Ventilation is a key factor in reducing mitigation. And so when all the windows are open, you can sit outside, that's a different scenario than when you're in the cabin, all cramped in and everything's fogging up, So the shoulder seasons, in my mind aren't as much of a priority, but it is still, of course, worth the board to consider if that would be a worthwhile investment. And so that being said, I think this kind of leads into my recommendation for the school year. Would it be okay if I make that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, in a perfect world, I 100% believe that our kids should all be learning together in the same school building. It benefits the kids. It benefits the teachers. We can do more. It's ideal, obviously. And we know that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and the considerations that we would make in a normal school year are not the considerations that we have to make right now.
Right.
And there's a really big responsibility, of course, on the schools as we look at bringing kids into our buildings, bringing kids and teachers together. So I believe, and I think that this recommendation will fit well with families. I don't know about the community, but I'm willing to answer any questions and to reassure the community that we are committed to coming back to Longfellow, all of our kids, all of our teachers, as soon as we can safely transport our children here without any extra risks or concerns. On top of transporting, I believe that opening those schools would be in the best benefit of our kids, also because of the increased flexibility and family support that they'll have during this very unusual, difficult, strange time for them. If they are each at their home island, if they get sick and have to go into our isolation room, they don't have to wait until the next boat. They can go home. If we need to be a little bit flexible with our scheduling to give them time to adjust to masks, we can do that if they're, not bound to a boat schedule. So I think that this recommendation could be relooked at any time. I think it could be relooked at every single school board meeting. Just like we look at Wednesdays, we decide today is not a good day to send the kids. Tomorrow is a good day to send the kids. I think that we don't have to make a decision for the whole year, but at this time, I believe that the most prudent, safest option is to open both schools. I have many plans on how to ensure equity to activities, specialists, teachers, everything. You know, we're good at being creative. The kids will benefit. They'll miss each other. It won't be perfect. We have plenty of space at both schools. We have plenty of materials. We have the staff. I feel, that's where I'm standing right now. So I
Can
have.
I add one thing, please? Amy, may I?
Did you guys hear that okay?
Yeah, I could. I'm sorry. If Haley, were you done? I wanted to add one thing, but if you weren't, I apologize.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
So I want to be really clear with folks. I'm starting my 5th year here. I couldn't be prouder of Haley right now because for her to come up with this plan, thinking first and foremost about the kids and the families, hats off to her. I am 100% behind this recommendation and proposal. I think it's sound. I think it's a blessing that we are in the position to even consider this. And I agree, it should be revisited on a regular basis. I will also say this. One of the things I learned in trying to understand the values and the needs of the community, when I first arrived, I was curious about, wow, there's 2 schools. Never once have I ever questioned that decision by the community of the Cranberries that they want to keep 2 schools open, that we will maintain 2 schools, and we are committed to the rotation of every 2 years, 100%. This is not in any way, nor should it be interpreted in any way by anyone, that this is a sidestep. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Global pandemic, and we need to exercise every precaution we can. And this is, I believe, a sound recommendation which can support students and families on each island community. We have the resources to do it. When you drill down into it and you look at the cost expectations, one gentleman asked me on the way off the island the other day when I was leaving Islesford, is we were going to hire more staff. Haley's done an exemplary job putting this together with our existing resources. We can make this work. And moreover, for the reasons that we talk about with safety, if there is a student or staff member that needs to leave, we really need to be in a position where we can contain and continue the education of our children. So I cannot say any more other than I'm completely supportive, and I think this is the right thing to do. And I think that it's very important we continue to hear from parents and community members and provide regular reports and updates. And everybody should know that when this pandemic is over, whenever that may be, this plan is off the table. We go back, administration is recommending we go back to the queue, the rotation, and we allow the community to determine that path forward. I can't say that strongly enough. This is during this time and this time only that we're making this request. Haley, if you want to add anything to that, please, but I just wanted to make sure that I threw the 2 cents in so the community could know where we stand. Thank you, Amy.
Darlene?
Okay, so I have a question for Haley, but I can come back to it because I'm excited to hear what it will look like. So I'm excited to hear about that. So, but my question is for Mark at this time, how will we define over?
How do we define what? I'm sorry, Darlene, could you say, how do we define what? Open?
You said that we will go back to our regular transition.
Over.
How do we define over? How is that defined?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, at some point, World Health Organization, CDC's governments will declare when the pandemic or the emergency is over. But moreover, I've said all along, this pandemic for each community is going to look differently. We're in a marathon, not a sprint. And I will say this, even, and this is, I'm certainly not a medical doctor, but scientists have told me that even when we do have a vaccine, when that is, and that's not right around the corner. I need to tell you that we're into this for some time. And when I say sometime, I think the school year we're about to enter, we're going to be dealing with the pandemic at least through the entire year, if not into the following one. That's certainly going to be true financially and economically, without a doubt. So that's a piece we'll grapple with. Over, the answer to that question, Darlene, I think is going to be how each community responds. We are in a position here in the state of Maine and on MDI and our communities where we are so lucky to be where we are to even consider these questions because we've done a good job. People have been wearing masks. People have been paying attention and using hand sanitizer and physical distancing. The answer to that question is really all the science out there and all the things people are talking about. That's the foundation. That's the core. Whether you listen to Dr. Shaw, Dr. Fauci, or any professional, they'll tell you there is no real guard other than those basic core components until we get a vaccine. And when we get a vaccine, even when we have a vaccine, that's not 100%. There's still going to be transmission. There are still going to be boosters required. So when we say over, schools as we know it are going to look different moving forward. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We're going to be able to incorporate some of the best practices and some of the things that we've learned along the way. But that's a real tough question, Darlene. And I think for me, it's not necessarily over as much as what are we going to do and continue to do to keep our schools open, keep our kids safe? Because if we weren't even talking about the pandemic, if we were talking about some other thing that would impact us, and I'm trying to think of an example and it escapes me right now, but these are things that we have to do irrespective of the pandemic. So I think that I don't see over coming anytime soon. I see us having to adjust, adapt, improvise the same way we've had since March 13th. But I will say this, I don't want parents to at all question the fact that, we're talking about the opening of school and we want community and staff voice. That's very important to the reopening. But the statutory authority to close schools rests with the superintendent. And I will not hesitate for 1 second if I believe that safety is compromised or there's any doubt in my mind that it's unsafe for a child or a staff member to close a school. And that has to be part of our component in our plan. But all along, even having said that, never once have I been foolish enough to think that I would do that without making sure that the board is comfortable with the decisions we're making and the recommendations. So I guess it's a hard thing to answer, Darlene. I think it comes down to this. We need to continue, we administrators, boards, we need to continue to listen. We need to continue to monitor data. And that includes not just state data, but local, regional data in terms of, is there community transition? We're committed to doing that with the hospital and experts on a regular basis, weekly. I'm still part of the Down East COVID-19 task force, which will align with recommendations and practices that have been employed since early spring in our businesses and communities that are allowing working families and businesses to move forward. Schools are different. Education is compulsory, but there are things that we can learn and we can do to make sure that teaching and learning, we can resume to teaching and learning. And we know that that ideal platform for all is in person, but we're going to have to make some modifications. So I'm sorry if I'm rambling, Darlene, but it's a tough question. And I'm just trying to be honest with people and also I have to be really careful when I give black and white answers, because if I come back and and we have to change because of one factor, I don't want people to lose any trust or faith in that we're trying to do the right thing. But this evolves and changes daily. It really does.
I appreciate that, Mark. It is a tough question, but I didn't know if that's something the state or the main state Department of Education or the CDC, you know, if they would be able to say, okay, it's safe for everybody to be in.
Yep.
So
They
how-
will. They will, Darlene. The short answer, the real short answer to that question is yes. Through the classification of zones, the state will say green, yellow, red. They will shut down regions or schools if they determine it to be unsafe.
Can I add to that? Because I think what you're asking, so right now the DOE is saying it is safe to open schools.
Yes.
Open. Our complicating factor is this public transportation factor, which like not all schools are looking at. So I think what he's saying about listening, I think part of our decision to return to Longfellow will be our kids' comfort level with all the new protocols at schools, our parents' comfort level with transportation, our parents' comfort level with kids being gone for a whole day. You know, I think that's why we need to revisit it every single month, because I don't think that it's necessarily Longfellow's tied to the length of the pandemic, but I think like right now with the opening of school, not knowing what tourism is doing, that, you know, kids not knowing any of the routines, teachers not, you know, all of that, that's like my recommendation is right now, and I'm happy to make a recommendation every month based on where we are right now, but we have this like extra layer of complexity.
And you just answered it, I think, because the part of the definition of when is this over will actually be when the parents feel comfortable and the kids feel comfortable. And that's all I needed to know, is how we define that.
Yeah.
And that's, okay. That's how,
Okay.
like, I hate to make a blanket statement when this is over with no definition of how you define over.
Correct.
So that makes sense. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Carrie?
So I have two things. One is a statement. I really would like everyone to stop using the word open when it comes to schools. In this community, that is a trigger word for a lot of people. Both schools are open, we just enroll. And people watching sometimes, it can be a word that's got a lot of emotion tied to it. Both schools are open, we just enroll one over the fall. So we would be dual enrolling the schools. Some people have a very hard time hearing the word closed, and they get scared thinking that we're doing something that we're not doing. No schools have been closed, they're just currently.
They're both open, they
Which we
have both been open, we're just gonna
Yeah, we're not
choose to
closing.
utilize both.
Yeah, and that's fine to use in other
That's helpful.
meetings, Mark, it's fine. I'm not saying don't ever use the word, but in this community, that's just a huge.
You know what? You're absolutely right, Carrie. And that was my verbiage, and I shouldn't have used that. But the reality is, they've always both been open. We've used them on Wednesday. So yes, you're absolutely correct, and that was my error. Thank you for pointing that out.
Point for that people understand that no schools are being closed, and you know.
Right.
So the other thing that I have a question about is the quality of the high schoolers. So the children who are going to MDI high school, not children who are going off to private schools or boarding schools, but children who are going off to like MDI high school, public day school.
Yep.
There's a remote option for them. I would assume that they would be suggested to stay home, but would them being able to use the respective schools on their islands, is that something? Like if they like, I just didn't like, I don't know how that factors into things. Like would MDI high school students be able to come and sit in another room, do their studies with their teachers if they had no internet at home? If there's all
I think the way I'll answer that, Amy, is, Carrie, is that just like we've done since last spring, we're going to work with families and students. The one thing I have to say is that our schools need to become pods, if you will, and we need to restrict visitors in so much as possible. One of the things we'll be doing in all of our schools is that during this period, visitors won't be allowed in our schools so that we can secure and make sure that we minimize any contact for our students and staff. That said, I'm sure that we can work within our schools and within entities on the islands, whether that be the library or other areas, to make sure that we provide those supports, whether it be technology or logistics. I'm very confident that'll happen. I know that happens all the time on Frenchboro and Swans, and I know that Haley has been a team player in working with the high school staff on that. So Haley, do you want to add anything to that? I don't think that's a showstopper for us, do you?
Okay, do you have something else, Carrie?
I have one more statement.
Okay, go ahead.
So my last statement is that if this is gonna be successful, I feel like the Cranberry Isles will be successful at it because we have two beautiful schools. And since our educational range of children is on the smaller scale, I feel like achieving the goals of safe distancing, mask wearing, you know, if a kid needs to go to another space to have some free mask time, I feel like this is the environment and the community to have this happen because we have two amazing schools and we have the space to make this happen. I cannot imagine a logistical nightmare that is going to be happening off island, but I feel like on the Cranberry Isles, we do have a beautiful foundation to make this work so that the children are not missing a step, because that's the goal of the school board, is to make sure that children are getting education, not the community's emotional well-being. That's it.
Okay,
I've got the hand.
oh, you know, I guess before calling to Lynn, my thought was about like the cleanings, the extra cleanings. We'll probably have to bring in our cleaning people more regularly. And air quality, I mean, when we find out the results from that inspection that Mark had done, I would, looking forward to hearing about that. Because I think that's key, ventilation and air turnover.
Definitely.
Everybody.
Can I add to that, Amy? Just real
Yes, go
quick?
ahead.
So I've started a document that I'll share with you. I've been waiting kind of for this meeting. And I've taken our projected enrollment, virtual, homeschooling, in person, all of that. The amount of PPE that I've ordered, a column for when it's arrived. I put in the building checklist developed by Ian and the school safety committee so that you can see when all of that was completed. I put in all the recommendations from each of the subgroup and the MDI RSS plan that was presented to the AOS board, and links for the handbooks, the dates that training was completed with staff, all of that. So you'll be able to get and then I'm submitting that to Mark. It has a place for a signature on the bottom so that the board and Mark can see that we have completed, all of the tasks that were necessary to safely open our schools. And so a lot of that information will be like all in the same place for you.
So, I'm sorry, and I'm like I said, I'm still very eager to hear how this is going to look. I'm really excited, but I'm still just thinking about other things. But anyway, so that I want to get out there, and that is if it does go on a year, 2 years, like Mark has said, it might potentially go on before we could, if that causes us, if the pandemic causes us to remain in two different schools for a year or 2 years, if God forbid, but if it does, then will we come out as a group to Longfellow? You know what I'm saying? Are we going to lose our 2 years?
I think the board will.
I mean, I don't expect an answer today.
Right.
I really don't expect an answer today.
I know what my recommendation would be, but I think the board will make
Right,
that
and I don't
decision.
expect, I just want us to kind of have that in the back of our minds. Hopefully this would be over with and the parents would feel comfortable and there'd be a vaccine and everybody would be happy much sooner than that. But I'm just saying, let's keep that in the back of our mind, how we're going to address that, because this stuff is something I think that will, I think it, yeah. So I think it's definitely, I think we need to consider that, but, do we go back to Ashley Bryan, or do we say, wait a minute, they never got their 2 years?
Right.
Right, I mean,
There's
I would think we would come to Longfellow, because that's next on
We
the
have-
location.
Yeah, I think what I would say to you guys is that it's good to keep the conversation going, keep the community voice going. Ultimately, the board can make a decision, I don't want to paint a gloom and doom. I just want to be realistic. I hope it's a lot less, and I hope I'm wrong, but it may be a longer term thing, but I think, we need to, my recommendation would be look at this period for what it is. It's a pandemic and it's different. And once that's over, that kind of resets the clock, and then the board and the community can determine where you want to go forward. But the locus of control is going to be maintained by Cranberry Island, not the AOS. That's your determination. And like any other decision, the board's going to take input, and your constituents are the students, but you're going to act in their best interest with community input. And I think if we can continue to provide regular updates and people know that we're welcoming feedback and we're being transparent, we're going to be in a good place. We want to hear from people. I think it's a good question, Darlene, but I don't think that's something you guys really need to worry about right now, but it's good that the community's here and that you're talking about it.
Okay, thank you. Carrie?
So the option on the table is that for the fall,
Mhm.
for the first
6 weeks
thing, 6 weeks,
ish.
both schools are enrolled
Mhm.
with children who are parents have chose the in-person learning, which will negate the fact that we have to do a bid for boat transportation, which is just not economically feasible just for shoulder season. Oh, we can't, I mean, I can't even remember what our budget line is for transportation, but
It's 35.
that chews up all of our budget.
And I think I want Haley to confirm this. I think this is really important for the community here and the board. This is being accomplished with no additional staff. We're not hiring additional staff. That's really important. I was asked by a gentleman that, and because I think people want to know. And so we're going to be doing this with our existing resources, but staff resources. Correct, Haley?
Correct.
Thank you. That's an important piece, I believe.
We'll have teacher Haley and principal Haley as our teacher.
Right.
And Danielle as support.
Yep.
And tech support staff. And then, and what was your, as far as September 8th? I mean, do you want to start remotely, or do you want to start in person, or is it too early to really?
I would like to hold on that piece, if I may, Amy, until we will provide an update for both the board and for parents and staff on our readiness. We are still finalizing our checklist, still doing our handbooks. As we get closer, and we can and should have another board meeting prior to that to make sure, but I don't think that determination needs to happen today. And frankly, I don't think we're ready to make that determination. Do you, Haley?
Not yet. I was gonna
Okay.
say, I'll share that document. You
Yeah.
can kind of keep track of
Yeah.
where.
If folks need to know right now, what I would recommend is that what we've said is that we're starting on the 8th with kids remotely. But if we're able to start hybrid in person sooner, we will. And that is going to be determined different, as I said, in each building based upon having the PPE, the training, and those reports. So I'm confident that the outer island schools will be ready sooner than our larger schools.
Work to open as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Can we hear what it, which teacher would be where, how would it look, what's the number of kids there? And I just kind of want to get a picture of how this is going to look.
Those things, so I don't 100% know yet, because until we knew that both schools would be enrolled, there was no way to fully plan that without foreshadowing way too much to everyone. This decision will influence families' decision on whether to enroll in person or not. Some families were not going to be comfortable sending their kids, so that would have resulted in a virtual or homeschool enrollment. So I have to wait. I think August 18th was the deadline for school enrollment. So on the 18th, I should have a final count of how many students we have, and then we'll be able to look at who's where and what those needs are, how we're going to split up our time. I have a couple different ideas about how to share staffing. I envision both schools having access to both teachers, and I'm working on what's the right sharing, because again, we're trying to keep in pods, mitigate, too much cross exposure or whatever. I plan on, Miss Gail going to Islesburg because that's where most of our younger students are. And then having the 2 classroom teachers do some sort of rotation to be determined, whether that's in 2-week chunks or what, I'm not sure. More about that?
Have you? Well, so mine will, are we gonna be having special teachers come out, or can we keep them? Can we keep them in that virtual world? Are we gonna have them? Because it's just the more people that are, I mean, I know the Cranberry Owls are safe, but they're not. And the reality is, it's only gonna take one person to make the end times happen. So it's, the reality is the more people that we have moving up, and we do have a lot of special teachers,
Right.
which I know is part of the planning that you guys need, but is there a way to keep Miss Mary still doing her art program online? And if so, does that work to the students that she would have at that time, that they could all, whoever's here, whoever's there, could meet online, they could do the class like they were doing virtually?
So we're gonna have to have a virtual component probably in order to get everybody access,
Okay.
even between buildings during the day, there'll likely be at times virtual blending.
Okay.
I have to work with Mark on that piece because staffing is complicated during this time.
Yes.
Is that fair to say, Mark? Okay.
That's really fair to say.
And I may be jumping the gun, but are you looking at in-person full days or half days? Or am I jumping ahead and need to just stop right now?
No, it's a good question. Again, I think I need to see the enrollment. I think I need to talk to families. I think I need to put together a proposal, confirm with Mark. We now with this setup, we do have flexibility. Kids will get a lot of one-on-one instruction.
Can I just add one thing to that with all this? These are great questions, and Haley needs some time to work with family. The answer to that question really is what parents are going to choose, and so we can tailor it. But I will say this: we learned a lot, and I get a lot of questions about remote learning when we just flipped the switch overnight, and that was hard on kids. It was hard on parents. It was hard on staff. We know a lot more now than we did then. And anything we're considering now is going to include those lessons learned. I'm confident parents, kids are going to see significant improvements based upon what we've learned, and that's a good thing. So I don't want anybody thinking we're going into this with our eyes wide shut. And we know, saying that we're going to need to continue to improve and get better at what we do, and we're learning every day with that. I think it's important to keep that in perspective, that this isn't like, okay, we're going to just pick up where we left off. We're going to pick up where we left off with improvements and with fidelity, and making sure that we're continuing to hone that and work with each individual family and kid and student in terms of what their needs are. I can't say that enough, because I want people to know that we're not in this tunnel vision piece and just not considering that feedback. Haley, please add, or if I've misspoken, please.
Okay, so I have another, I guess, two things. One is for people, like the high school students and the teachers are still gonna be coming on the boat.
Yep.
Is there, and I know like the school buses, they have some protocols they need to implement. I mean, what is
Our expectation, Amy, is that if we're paying for transportation for staff or students, whether that's a bus, masks will be required, PPE will be required. We will require that. There's not going to be any negotiation or discussion about mask use. We're required to do it from the state. I've had some questions about that. I'll answer that the same way. If we're providing if a parent's providing transportation to and from, that's different. But if we're providing the transportation, it's no different than life jackets. A couple of years ago, we had this discussion about life jackets when Haley first came on board. No, you're going to wear a life jacket. You're going to wear a mask. We're going to make sure that we do the things that we know we need to do at a minimum to keep kids safe. that's why it's important people know what the parameters and the expectations are going to be for school, because it's not only keeping them safe, but it's keeping others safe. So that has to be something that we're really clear on. And those handbooks that are coming out very, very soon will explain all of those requirements and the things that need to be met. And we can meet with individual families, board members, anybody has questions. And I will say this, we're working hard to make sure we get this right. We're using tools and practices from the government, from the Department of Education, from local health professionals, but information might change and we might have to update and amend. So I think that's an important piece. Yes, Haley.
She's saying on the public transportation, they will be exposed to people who are probably not wearing masks. Is that kind of what you're
Well,
asking?
I mean, it's like, when are the boat companies gonna be on board with, understanding that these kids are riding to school and, precautions need to be in place when the kids are on and the teachers.
Well, I would say this, with all due respect to any company, I believe any business person, any company should really look at what the governor has declared is required. I'm stunned when I go out into public places and see some people that just say, I'm not wearing a mask. It's not an option, it's a requirement. And again, I don't want to single any entity out, but personally, I try to avoid businesses that don't employ those practices. It's just because I don't want to expose myself or others. And I think, and I hope that any company, whether that be a boat or, you just got to you got to do the right thing, and to not do the right thing.
I think we should touch base with them.
Yep,
Just to have an
I think
understanding.
Mark should.
I think
I
that,
will. I mean, and if it's a question of they don't have access to the materials, we'll work with them. I mean, they're handing out masks, free masks in Bar Harbor. If access to the mask is the issue, we'll work with them.
formal agreement with the morning boats. There is no formal agreement with any students riding with Beal and Bunker. So
And the staff too. I mean, we don't want the staff to get exposed.
100%. I mean, the reality is that those are public transportation. On public transportation, you are supposed to be wearing a facial mask. So
So can we come up with some sort of agreement with Beal and Bunker?
Haley and I will reach out. We will talk. And again, I want to say this: we've had a really good relationship with that company. And we value that relationship. We want to work with them, and it may just be simple as communicating. And I can't imagine that anybody would want to do anything that anybody wouldn't support anything that's going to keep themselves or others safe. So I think let's assume good intent. Let Haley and I work on that and report back.
Thank
know,
you. And I mean, we all value Beal and Bunker very much, and we want to do the right thing. It's just a matter of, maybe having some sort of an agreement that's more than just a
Right.
clipboard. So,
Yep.
and my other question was, do we need to vote on any of this?
What was the question? Boat monitor?
Need to vote on anything? Well, the action item was the bid for
but
both.
do we have to say that we are not going to accept that bid?
Well, you don't have to take action. You can just, if you choose not to make a motion, we can write back and say the board at this time has chosen not to move forward with accepting any bids, and that's fine. You don't have to vote on that.
So we don't have to take action on the vote,
Nope.
but do we need to take action on enrolling both schools?
No, I don't think so, because again, as Carrie very appropriately pointed out, we've had kids enrolled in the Cranberry Island schools and we've used both schools. We're not opening one or closing one. We've kept them open. I think at this time, what I'd say is that it's important for folks to work with Haley on what their intentions are. I think it's for their children. Are they planning on having their children return? do they want the remote option or do they want to consider a remote hybrid when we're ready for that? And that they know the plan. I think parents on Islesford and Great Cranberry need to know this is the plan, and that's going to influence their decision. What I would recommend is that Haley release that information. Let's hold some parent forums, whether they be virtual or give parents the opportunity to come in, ask some questions, and allow that process to unfold and within this next week, and then we can come back. I don't think you need to take any formal action right now at this time. And I mean, I'm not trying to tell you that you can't, but at this point, I think proceeding this way, because the board sets policy, the board approves a calendar, but really what we're talking about are the administrative parameters for teaching and learning. You don't have to vote on those. And with all due respect, you really shouldn't be. Those are administrative and in nature. If your administrators, your superintendent, your principal aren't doing things that are in line with the policies or the board wants, you hold us accountable, but you don't have to vote on that. The plan you're voting on is whether or not you're going to be, what the AOS voted on, whether you're going to be hybrid, remote, in person, and what was approved gave us an umbrella to be able to move forward individually by communities.
Okay.
I just need to confirm for my own mind that I think I understand, but I just want to confirm. When we're saying that the parents get to choose remote only, hybrid, or in person, or that's our goal for them to ultimately be able to choose that, then it's not that it's the greater number decides what we're going to do. It's each family gets to decide for themselves, correct?
We have two enrollment options actually. One is virtual only. It's like, the main virtual academy where it's just there's a school set. So we have a virtual option, and then we have an in-person option, which at times might be hybrid, which at times might be remote, which at times will be fully in person. So that's kind of this like meldable option, but we're calling that the school-based option because you're going to send your kids when you can right into the building, So those are the two tracks. And on our enrollment form that's due on the 18th, you'll pick one of those two tracks, or of course, choose the homeschool. So those are kind of what we're looking at for this fall, this year.
So one of the things that was proposed in this stuff is that if you choose the virtual option, that you might not get the teachers or the staff that you're regularly used to. In our demographic, if a parent chooses to virtually school their children for the fall, does that mean they would have teachers from the AOS, or would it be specific? Would they have you and Ms. Haley, or would they have some people that they don't know?
I think we want to be careful answering that because, look, God forbid Haley gets sick or has to be quarantined, or either Haley or any, we have people, specialists coming out. I think we want to keep our options open and flexible to support our kids. If somebody does become ill or, we have a gap, we want to be fluid and our schools be able to provide those supports. Haley, I don't know if you disagree or you want to add anything, but we've kind of tried to leave this open-ended so each school can support other schools. I don't know if you feel differently.
Very virtual, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Can you brought, and this may be what you're asking, or maybe just something that just came to my mind. But if it's hybrid and in person, then is that through the Maine State Academy, or is that actually?
Hybrid and is part
I
of the
think you just
in-person.
use the Maine State Academy
That was
as
just
an
like an example.
example. They're not really using that.
No, okay, and then I was like, then what
No.
virtual program are you?
MBI virtual only. MBI coming to the school buildings when you can.
Got to, okay, now, sorry. No, you're fine. I never even.
It's 4 o'clock.
It is.
Ooh, sorry.
Okay, so what do you?
10:01. Well, do we have to vote on anything?
I am not recommending the board take any action on the boat bid or any further action. What I would recommend is that we leave here knowing that Haley, as the principal, is going to communicate the calendar change, is going to communicate. I sent a follow-up to staff and I'm asking the principals over the weekend or by Monday to send a communication out that outlines next steps. That would be specific through Haley to the Cranberry Owls. And then asking, it's probably a lot easier out there for Haley either to meet virtually with each family, sit down, have a Q&A, make sure they're able to ask questions. And then once we've assembled that, give them a soft deadline to say, we'd like your decision by X, then come back to the board and the community and say, here's what we've heard and here's what we're recommending and we're informing. Based upon that informing, if the board has concerns or the community has concerns, we'll address it and adapt accordingly. But really, at the end of the day, as Carrie said, our schools are open. They're going to be open, and it's just about how we're going to deliver teaching and learning, and that is important for parents and the board to know. But it's also important that rests with administration. And I want to emphasize, this is, when I say administration, building administration. So it's tailored to each community. So in short, no, we're not recommending any action at this time. And the board can call a meeting at any time. If something comes up, information, we don't have to wait a month out. We can always schedule a meeting as information or action may be required.
I'm a little concerned not voting to enroll both schools during this trying time and then reevaluate it because we voted to enroll Longfellow School back in the spring. So if you go to our minutes, we have where we voted to enroll Longfellow. Right, that we need to vote to enroll both schools, right?
Was it an actual vote or was it just a discussion?
I can research that with Selena and Darlene. If that, it might make some sense to take some formal action, but why don't we research that to see what the board did last time? We've got a little bit of time before September 8th, but I think let me give that a little bit more thought too. It might be a good idea. Now that this information's out there in the public, people are going to consider it. We're going to obviously, I hope, get some feedback on it. And I hope people will look at it for what it is. It's short term. It's cost effective. It's not requiring more staff. So, and it might be wise for the board to formally adopt that. Let me work to see what the process has been in the past. I think we have a little time though, if the board's okay with that.
I thought it was kind of. I probably have to look in the minutes to see for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do is research what the action was last time.
Okay, so I don't even know when we would have.
I really don't know. Just in my mind, it was a vote that could have been a discussion, but
Yeah.
I just think we need to keep it consistent with whichever form we've been doing.
All right, so we didn't take any action on our action item. So I guess we'll just let the company know that
we're gonna notify the company at this point. At this time, we're just not moving forward with accepting any bid.
So moving on to other business, is there any other business we need to discuss?
No, I have nothing. And I checked with Selena on public comment. There was nothing that had been received right up until 20-30 minutes ago.
Okay. So no further public comment. Any other further public comment in the room?
Justin, I just want to say, after hearing all this discussion, I'm very impressed with the research and the work that Mark and Haley had done on this. It's very challenging. And I'm also very impressed with the questions the school board asked. So I think you're on the right track. I feel much more comfortable now hearing all this, and kudos to all of you for working your way through this period.
Thank you so much, Phil. I mean, that means a lot. We've been working hard, but I will just say, I know we're not supposed to respond, Amy, but I just want to say thank you because Phil is at just about every meeting, and I know he cares about the kids in the school as our residents do, and that means a lot. So sorry for responding, but I want to say thank you, Phil.
thank you, Phil. Any other public comment?
Yes,
Audrey?
I just want to say that I'm so glad that I'm hearing about flexibility for this school to be open when it's right for this school to be open or the other school, whatever. That it's not all just one big lockstep. And Mark, you've done a great job. Haley, you've done a great job. And it's a relief for me to hear that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Audrey.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else?
I just, boy, oh boy, wasn't it great to come out to both Cranberry, Islesford and Great Cranberry the other day. It's just, people were so nice. It was awesome. Although it was hot as heck, it was awesome. Thank you. It was good to see people. It was good to be in the schools, and it was a real positive feeling. I want to say that. And I think the sooner we can get people safely and comfortably in our schools, that's a real positive, because through this pandemic and all the health concerns, I'm acutely aware of the mental health needs and the social, emotional needs of everyone. So we just want to, as much as we can, move forward and stay positive. That's a good thing, because as people, I think the social interactions are equally as important as the other components. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm very pleased to hear that you came out and were checking out both buildings. That's really comforting to me. Okay, so future agenda items.
Well, I think we've got a lot of things. I think Darlene brought up a good point. Potentially, there may potentially be a vote, but I think, again, a real specific update on the plan for reopening, or not necessarily reopening, but our teaching and learning platforms and the use of the buildings, and any other specifics, updates on our efforts to reach out to the boat companies and vendors to work with them on safety protocols. I think those will all be very, very important. Haley, I don't know if you have anything else, but it doesn't have to be formal, but any outreach you can do with families and the community so that we can report that back to the board as well. And certainly if there's anything from the board wants to task me with, when I talked about the environmental pieces, I will be sharing information and recommendations that come forward with certainly with Haley and you all and the public. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, because I have to meet with that individual and we have to talk about scope, but that will be included as well. And then I'm not sure, again, we want to get the final certification on the lift. And Haley, I don't know if there's anything else you have.
I don't think of anything.
Okay. And I just, again, if you guys have questions, board members have questions, please, you don't have to wait for these meetings. You email us, call us, we're happy to provide information. I don't want the public to think they have to wait a month or for a board meeting. We're happy to answer questions as they come up. Thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. So date and time of the next meeting.
And I understood that we probably should meet before the 8th, is that correct?
Yeah, I think you should, just given the things we've talked about. I think you got some good questions. You're gonna want some answers. So we can work with Amy to set the date. I mean, if you want to do it now, that's fine, but I do think it would be important to do it well before the 8th.
The first Friday is September 4th.
Sure.
Would that be soon enough?
Certainly we don't want to go any later, but I think so.
Do you want to do another meeting in August?
The 28th is the last Friday in August. That's 2 weeks from today.
I mean, I could do that if that's something you guys want to do, and that might, again, that might be a better date, but and then the backup would be, but I'm fine with that. Whatever you folks would like to do.
When will the teachers, when do you guys start back?
August 25th.
Yeah. So that might be good on the 28th. You'd have a couple of days worth of updates and, I think 28th would be fine if that's what you guys would like to do.
August 28th?
Yep,
Okay.
and then based on our discussions to put anything else in place that we need to.
And we're,
So should we meet on Islesford?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing the rotation. I think that's the right thing to do. And,
At the school, because there won't be.
and I'm gonna do my best to get out there and be there in person on this one. I'm sorry, I just got back to back to back, but I want to come out and be at the next meeting. So if it's Islesford, I'll do my best to be out there.
30 a.m. Islesford on August 28th.
Okay.
And Mark, we know you got a lot going on, so. we're
Oh,
just-
no, hey, you guys, trust me, it's mental health for me to come out and be out there. I love coming out to the schools in the island, so thank you. And I can't wait to be there in person with you guys again. Thanks.
oh, I guess we have to vote to adjourn. Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I thank you very much, you guys. I hope you have a great day and enjoy the weekend. And thank you all for your support and your kindness. And it's Haley, on behalf of Haley and myself, it's a pleasure to work for and with people like you guys. You're amazing. Thank you very much and take care. I'll see you later.
Thank you,
Mark. We really appreciate the live stream.
Yes.